So we warmed up. Are we smiling?
I'm still feeling good. I'm happy to see you this morning.
Brilliant. We are smiling, and welcome aboard, everybody. I've got my great buddy, David Robinson, here. He's another Yankee boy, and we used to fly together at Nissan, or Nissan, as he will refer to it as, a few years ago. David's now flying 650 for a private operation up in the north side of America, but internationally as well. And we worked, I reckon, probably for about 2.5, 3 years together. The other notable thing, which coincides with Hook, who was on the podcast recently as well, is that we were the 3 co-captains on the infamous flight from Beirut to Tokyo when Carlos Ghosn got himself arrested, which then precipitated the downfall of the operation, as it were, and we all lost our jobs. So we've all moved on. And we were talking a little bit earlier about how that affected us all mentally, and we'll go into that a bit later because it's a really fantastic one. Anyway, enough of my noise, my voice. We want to hear from you, David. Welcome. Lovely to have you with us.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me on. Just for a couple of clarifications on points there. In the South, where I'm from, we call people from anywhere north of Kentucky, like north of the Ohio River, if you're familiar with the geography, those are Yankees. We're not Yankees.
Okay, all right. Well, I'll give you that one. And
I also would love to be flying a 650 again, but we're in a 450. But that's whatever, same thing. Basically.
Yeah, exactly. I'm thinking because we flew the 650 together.
We just can't fly racing. Far. Just 9 hours instead of 15 hours or whatever in the sea.
Well, 450 is more gentlemanly, isn't it? I'd say.
Sure. Yeah. Sure. It's solid and stable.
Yeah. It's still a Gulfstream. It's brilliant. Anyway, welcome. And just as always, love to hear a few minutes of your background, how you got into aviation, and then we'll start chewing the fat off some really good concepts around mindset, confidence, teamship, etc.
So I grew up flying around. My dad had a small aircraft just for fun. He owned grocery stores and was an attorney, but just his passion in life was flying. So he had everything from Moonies to Cessna Skymaster, which is the push-pull prop airplane. And so I just kind of grew up riding around with him. When I was a kid, I just would tell people I had all the same dream jobs of everybody else. I wanted to be a baseball player, or I wanted to be a basketball player, or I wanted to be a doctor. And They all had a little asterisk at the bottom. As long as I can make enough money to be a pilot, or I want to fly the team's jet, or whatever, So I had this idea that I was going to be a basketball player, but fly the team jet, And at some point along the way, my life path crossed with my first ever mentor, who was an airline pilot for American Airlines, and he was on disability because he had developed Meniere's disease and was substitute teaching at my middle school. And that was the first time that I ever found out that you could actually be a pilot as a job. And
wow,
it just blew my mind. And from then on, it was that I wanted to be a pilot. And he actually intersected with me a lot for the next 8 years or so, and helped in different ways. I did get my private pilot's license, so the first certification while I was in high school. My dad's had a lot of contacts at the local airport. I grew up in a very small triangle, of things. There was the airport, the soccer fields, my school, and my house were all within a mile of each other. And it was just, I did a lot of my time and energy in those places. So
sounds very healthy, very, very healthy.
Yeah, I think it was. So from there, I went straight into university. Just happened in that triangle was a university in it's Middle Tennessee State University right here in the center of Tennessee, and they have a large aerospace program that's grown into a national leader in training professional pilots. And I just went straight into there. and got through the rest of my ratings in just a few years, and became an instructor pilot there, and took my first jet job in about 2005. So coming up on 20 years of flying jets now. And so that was kind of a little bit of boom time, but then right as I was kind of getting my footing was the financial crisis. And so I kind of had 3 or 4 different jobs that were all sort of low tier for a period there. Met my wife and we got married, and about shortly after we decided to get pregnant, and right about that time was when the financial crash happened. So we ended up actually moving to Colorado, taking a job flying a Hawker there, which was my first actual real stable job. Everything else was just 9 months here, a year there kind of thing. From there is where I launched and got hired by Nissan, and
you said it right,
and moved from Colorado back to Tennessee and back into my triangle, a very tight triangle there of where I grew up, and was just, such a unique and exciting opportunity for me. Because I went in with basically one jet type rating. I'd been flying a Hawker, which you're familiar with. For people who aren't familiar with aviation, it's about an 8 or 9 seat jet. If you actually put 9 people in it, is not luxurious at all. If you put 3 or 4 people in it, it's quite luxurious, very nice. But with 9, it's like worse than being on an airline flight. And Nissan
British aeroplane, wasn't it? We swapped each other's nationalities in terms of airplanes.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, forgot about that. Anyway, so I was able to get on a Nissan because I had that experience in the Hawker, and they just happened to have a Hawker that they use for North America operations. So it was an easy hire when they needed some more help on that sort of domestic side. And it just was such an amazing opportunity and just the right time to hit, because I took the job, and then, about a year or so after that, got into the Gulfstream, and then the Gulfstream turned into 3 Gulfstreams and a couple Challengers. We had a rapid expansion. And during that time, I had been taking on extra projects and doing all the things that I could to have, a chance to be able to move up and try to help lead the department as it grew. And that just kind of put me in really cool, neat situations where I was, flying long range Gulfstreams all over the world. And I kind of got to cut in line a little bit just from being in the right place at the right time, which is how Ben and I met. I think a fateful day in Tokyo, I think, is where we first met, in Narita, maybe.
I think it was. Yeah, I think it was, isn't it?
Yeah. And so one of my very early trips as a fully, blessed international captain was to meet up with 2 Yanks. I was the Yank. 2 Brits. It was actually 3 Brits. It was a flight attendant and 2 British captains that we were using for our overflow, right? Because you guys were sort of TAG employees and sort of Nissan employees, and it was super helpful for us because we needed the experience, obviously. And I don't know, what are your perceptions of that time?
Yeah, very much. I mean, it was a wonderful job. It was just completely different. We were flying on FAA rules, American rules, with you guys. Part 91 is effectively private, and I'd been at TAG for most of the 8 years or 7 years I've been there already. It was all corporate stuff and private jets, but we were running on a commercial certificate. So to come and work with you guys was a very different orientation, and it was, there's so many good things about both sides, but I love the fact that it really was down to the department as to decide what was safe and what was unsafe, pretty much. And I thought it was an excellent operation. I was really impressed with you guys, and I effectively was, excuse me, with Viraj, we were seconded to you. So when there was a captain on board like you or Hook, for example, then we weren't the guys in charge. But when we had a couple of your first officers or co-pilots on board, then we were the captains. So it was quite an interesting mix, cultural differences and regulations and age differences as well, and experience. Honestly, it was wonderful. It's one of those things, it's got to come to an end at some point. And Tom, the chief pilot, looked after us really well. I didn't have to go away from home. I think I was away for 12 or 13 days each month, traveling in the world. It was a dream job, really.
Well, for me, I was, Tennessee boy, in this small area, and to have gotten to be with a multinational enterprise like that, and to be there at a moment of just big growth for our little fiefdom, it was just such a unique opportunity for me, to be able to build my dream house just right there in the middle of where I wanted to be, and just to have all of these opportunities to travel the world and see new places. I mean, you and we went, I don't remember all the trips that we did, but I specifically remember we went to Melbourne and Bangkok and Tokyo, and just what a cool experience. I mean, I think the most elevated level of global, like my high water mark of globalization was, I was working, I don't know if you remember, I was working on my MBA through Embry-Riddle, and we were in Melbourne, and I was out jogging through like the botanical gardens or something, some really nice park or something that was near our hotel. And I was listening, I was office hours for my professor. And so I was just listening to people asking questions. And I'm out jogging in the park, and, there's people all over the world in my ear, my AirPods, and, I'm on a phone call. And then all of a sudden I run into you, and I'm like, hey, man, sorry, I'm on a phone call. I can't talk right now. I'm muted, but, whatever. I'm trying to listen in so I can pass the next exam, And it just like, where am I? How did I get to this point, where I have like all these friends from all over the world? I'm in Melbourne and running around, and, it was just such wonderful. A cool, and that trip, like I said, it was you and Viraj and Katie, I believe, was the FA, and just everybody was just so professional, and we had such a good time, and made the mission work, did everything, and got it done.
I think that's the thing. We've been talking a lot about that, and we always did it when we were in our time together in the cruise, and when we were out having fun together. This is the thing: when the greatest capacity is when we're relaxed and having a good time, as far as I'm concerned, because you just have that ability to soak so much more and deal with so much more. And that's one of my big things, is trying to understand the emotional side of ourselves. It's one of my big central themes, of knowing when we're feeling unsure, uncertain, a bit fearful, a bit envious, a bit jealous, things like that. But, those trips, for example, there was never any, well, I'm going to prove myself to you, and I want to be the more experienced. You're 10 years younger than me, and a little bit more than that from Viraj. Yet we were totally on the same level. There was no break in terms of our professional and social respect for each other, and it just made such fun and such ease. And actually, I think we operated incredibly professionally, but with great ease. And it's so easy when the ego starts to pull us in the wrong direction of proving, pleasing, performing, perfecting, pretending, and all the P's that I often go on about.
Yeah,
it restricts us so much. And that was a great example. You came along to the Three Brits. You could have tried to prove yourself, and you were the guy who was the main guy of the operation. Effectively, you were the senior captain there, in charge of all of us, and it could have been very different with the different personalities. And it was such a pleasure.
Well, I got to give definitely some of, I was kind of thinking back on that, and how and why that worked so well. And I got to give a lot of the credit to Viraj, because I met him first. I want to say maybe he and I did a leg together before you came along. And I mean, anybody that watched your podcast with him or listened to it before, he is just such a calming and soothing influence. I used to say, like,
spiritual man.
Every aspect of him, he's such a beautiful person, and every way you can, slice and dice it. And
Yes.
he, flying into Haneda after a 13-hour flight, can go one of two ways, right? It can be, because it's something we did all the time in Tokyo's busiest airport there, Haneda. Uh, and a lot of times we would be flying from Paris to Tokyo, or from somewhere in Europe, or potentially from the United States, all of which would be over 10 or 11 hours. And so it's quite busy at the beginning, and then there's a long lull where there's stuff to do, but it's certainly not 3 people of work to do, right? So there's some rest and but then it gets really busy, and you're tired, and your brain's got to do this quick, boomerang thing. And every time with Virage, it was always just this slow, methodical, planned out. Everything was just so smooth going in there. And it always, I would say, it feels like he's like your Xanax co-pilot, like if he's in the seat next to you, either side, you're just going to feel smooth and calm, and just the highs and lows are just gone, and it's just going to be fine, whereas there's a lot of times when we landed, doing approaches and stuff in there where it was we're missing we're not understanding the controller and this and that, and everybody's like, okay, what, and it goes from lull to busy real fast, and it just always felt like everything was in slow motion with him. So it's just such a calm and easing influence. And I distinctly remember on my way to Tokyo having you guys' resumes and feeling super intimidated, just like, I have like serious imposter syndrome here. Like, what, how? And so I don't know, at some point I came up with this like speech for you guys where it's like, look, hey, I am here because I know the Nissan stuff. Like, I know our procedures and our policies, and how we operate. I know the paperwork that you need to do. I know how to get you signed off for stuff, and that's what I'm here to do. I'm here to make sure that we get all the boxes checked and all that. Everything else, look, I am really leaning on you guys. Like, we got to work together. Like, if this is going to work, because I've never flown with you guys, and all of a sudden we have this task to get all the way to Melbourne, and it's something that I didn't have necessarily the verbs and the narrative for just yet, but later in a book that I really like, that I refer to a lot, called Crucial Conversations, they talk about it as adding to a pool of shared meaning. So if you think of it as a metaphor of a pool, we're trying to fill this pool up with as much expertise as possible. And there's so many things, and I want you to elaborate on those things, because you're more into that side of what can prevent us from adding to that pool of shared meaning. But I think, me coming in with some humility, and Virage being just so warm and kind when I first met him, and we just had an instant rapport, allowed you to come in, and we just all poured in our expertise together and filled each other's holes and filled each other's gaps. And I listened to, oh, okay, so you guys like to, I'm trying to think of an example, set the barometric, go to standard before you go through the altitude instead of as you're going through. Like, that was a difference for me. And I asked, and we discussed it, and, but what are some of those things that would prevent us from having that success of actually filling that pool of shared meaning from your expertise?
Yeah, I think you touched on so many good points there. I think the one word which I always come back to is threat. There's got to be some level of threat that prevents us communicating well. Communicating well with ourselves, let alone other people around, and finding the very best in ourselves, i.e. a sense of inadequacy in our own minds. That's a threat to ourselves, because then we will create these limited beliefs of which we will find it very difficult to overcome. We will constantly be reminded by our ego that we're not good enough. And I think when you come into a situation like we did, it's really interesting, because you came along, and I remember thinking, yeah, this could be a culturally difficult thing. Much younger guy, perhaps could be wanting to prove himself, is in charge. We're not. We're much older, different experience. There might be some heads butting here somewhere. And I think that's, you talk about humility, which is top of my list with you. Sounds like I'm blowing smoke up your ass, but I am for a reason, is because, yeah, you came in much less experienced and thinking, I need to, yeah, absolutely. And I think you came in thinking, I need to add to the situation rather than start swinging fists and proving, you're the big cheese, Billy Big Bollocks. And that was so refreshing. I mean, we've talked about that. We had plenty of people that we've flown with who've been very different, I think, due to that idea that they feel threatened by somebody coming in. So for me, yeah, humility was a great thing. And also just talking to you, you're an incredibly educated man, very articulate, studying an MBA straight away, 10 years younger than me, 2 young kids, doing up a new house, lovely young wife, lots of stuff. Your CV, in terms of my mind, was very impressive. So I, be honest, like we all do, we need to create a persona that's likable to people. We needed to do that for our mums, well, intuitively, intrinsically, when we were born, because it hurt like bloody hell when they, bless their heart, when they pushed us out. It was a serious trauma. So if they decided we were ugly on the outside and ugly on the inside, we would be left to be eaten by the wolves. So I think intrinsically we are geared towards trying to gain somebody's favor as a basic survival technique. But when you come in and realize that you don't have to prove yourself, you don't have to start. Well, I have actually for many years been a people pleaser. That's another story of just trying to get that validation because of my own insecurities. But I recognize I'm in my 50s now and done an awful lot of internal work and realize that was just keeping me back. That was holding me back. So I now don't take it personally when somebody dislikes me. It's certainly uncomfortable. And the key to any success is breaking down the communication problems and the barriers, i.e. threat. So yeah, that's probably a long-worded way of but Viraj was a great one. We are great mates. It was so nice to have that conversation. We had that incredible experience of being hit by thunder and lightning over the South China Sea in the middle of 5 a.m, completely unexpectedly. And as we talked about, we worked so well together, and our one shared word from that is brotherhood. You hear it in much more extreme circumstances, from war stories and terrible accidents, and it really, those sorts of events do bring you together. But I think likewise for us is, yeah, we're on the other side of the world. We're trying to come together to create something that's efficient, successful for the people we're flying, but also for the same for us, to make it as efficient and the most enjoyable it possibly could. And I think it was a great example of how we do that. Yeah.
It just kind of jogged a memory of mine of maybe when this light bulb went off of, hey, when you're intimidated by someone, remember that they're your teammate. When I was in high school, I played a lot of sports because I was at a small school. In my junior year, I was on the soccer team. What do you guys call that?
Yeah, football, but soccer.
Football, the football team.
Football.
I was clearly not a football player, but I was a footballer. And this guy came in, and he was Thai, coincidentally, and amazing player, like so good. His feet were so fast, and he was our best offensive player that the school had ever seen. He scored more goals than anybody had ever scored, previous. And I was I played defense, so we called it sweeper. I don't know, is that what Brits call it? Yeah. So I was the center of the defense. I was tall, so I was able to, knock a lot of headers out and stuff like that. So, and I had to go up against him every day in practice, and he made me look dumb every single day. And I hated him. I was so jealous, for weeks and weeks. And then at some point, he scored a goal, maybe in an actual game. And I was so proud of him and so excited. And something just clicked in my mind. And the next time at practice that he just made me look stupid again, I thought, that's what he does to the other team. And I am so glad he's on my team. And I just started every time he would do it, instead of pouting and, going and trying to slide tackle him or whatever, I would just be like, good job, teammate. And he picked up on it after a while too. And it just became our thing. He, anytime I did something right, he'd be, good job, teammate. And it totally flipped the switch for me, where I went, yeah, he's on my team. Like, this guy is awesome. I don't have to have a rivalry with him. Like, we're working on this together. So I think maybe that sports lesson, hopefully, maybe that translated later on, where I was able to say, hey, look, these guys are on my team. I mean, these guys are incredible. I don't have to compete with them. Let's just figure out how we can work together. I can get the ball to you, when I'm not going to score from the back, So
yeah, I think that's the value of teamwork, isn't it? And I often repeat it, that I played a lot of sports like you, and one of my coaches early on just said the value of a team is so much greater than the sum of its parts. When you've got the right leadership, we've got the great characters in there. And of course, when I was at school, it would be the manager or the coach, and then depending on who was becoming the captain, whether they were wanting to be the big and best, and in terms of their uncertainty of themselves, would have to belittle and invalidate other people who didn't come up to their standards, or because it's so easy to criticize, isn't it? And that's always, in my mind, to do the lack of understanding of our sense of inadequacy. Sometimes we don't even recognize that. But I think that comes to humility. So the point is, it reminds me of a quote that I think it was one of the Greek philosophers, Cicero or something, talked about it. There's no nobility in being superior to your fellow man. True nobility is being superior to your former self. Mm-hmm. So when we're young, we're like, oh, God, I feel inadequate because they're better at soccer, they're better at rugby, they're better at tiddlywinks, they're better at ping pong, whatever it is. But finding our unique skill is just so valuable, isn't it? We play sports at school, we study IQ type orientated maths, physics, chemistry, but we're not actually specifically encouraged to learn about emotional intelligence and social intelligence and practical intelligence. And I really think that the emotional intelligence is the key to this, because you could recognize in that particular circumstance that your value was in hugging that guy, giving a big old pat up. He was on your seat, on your team. There was no threat there whatsoever. It was just going to be an advantage. And it's so interesting how, even in my 50s, I come across people, even in my parents' age, in their 80s, how gripped they are by a sense of inadequacy. That means that they feel inferior when somebody comes along, tells a better story, or whether somebody has achieved better status at work or whatever. Very easy to do that in flying, isn't it? Because it's an ego-based male thing coming along. But I flew fast jets, baby, and I flew the tankers, baby, and I've flown Hawkers or Gulfstreams or whatever. And it's very easy to try and promote yourself as thinking, well, maybe I'm a little bit more. Sometimes I think to myself, am I trying to prove myself here by pointing out my successes? But great leadership is all about elevating other people, I think, which we completely agree on those subjects, I think.
I'm gonna one more riff on being a teammate with Shiro, was his name. Then when we got to college, played intramural ball, and again, I was at a small high school, and we lost at everything. So I had years of just losing, and he invited me onto his intramural team, and it was the most international thing I've probably ever done. We had guys everywhere. He was just a good guy that pulled people together, and we had the best football team I have ever played on. I don't know how I was a part of the team, but it was so fun. We won championships. We got T-shirts and everything. It was fun. So much fun.
Wonderful.
That was the spoils of that whole learning experience.
But. Yeah, and again, I got my kids and encourage them to do team sports, because I think you're not only developing a particular physical skill, but you're understanding the benefit of being part of a team, which is much bigger. Again, spiritual intelligence. I've talked about emotional intelligence, of understanding when we're gripped by the troubles in life, the envy, the fear, the threat, and why we're feeling so elated and excited and full of the world, and it's wonderful. Understanding both those sides is really important. But the spiritual side for me is the idea, we talk about it now, inclusivity and fair share, etc. It's really understanding that we're just part of something that's so much bigger than us, and the success of that team is your soccer team or one of my sports teams really depends on everybody, because one sour egg can bring the atmosphere down, and then it's just the oxygen gets sucked out, and nobody performs to the best level. Nobody even understands their potential. That's the thing, isn't it? When you function well as a team, you suddenly think, how the hell did I do that? And how the hell did that person do that? Because we're effectively creating, I always metaphor it to the aeroplane. We fly the Gulfstreams, which are just incredible machines. They are put together with such excellence and dedication and love. And every time we launch, if we work for a good organization like we both did with Nissan, with Ed in charge of the maintenance, I mean, we could guarantee that he would just have put 110% into that. And this incredible, efficient machine with all these amazing different parts coming together, all the people that were planning our flight mission and supporting us all the way through. It's such for me, it's such an incredible metaphor for how we should be running our personal lives and our own individual lives, understanding all those intrinsic mechanical bits inside in terms of the neurotransmitters, the chemicals, and why our bodies function like this, and why nutrition is such an important thing, hydration, etc. So again, we're trying to create this incredible team individually within ourselves, as well as in everything we're doing outside there. So emotional health, number one, then spiritual health. How does that impact? How does that improve humanity generally in our tiny little market, and then the bigger market, the bigger experience, the bigger universe is the way I think of it. So yeah, and humility really is the big thing, is not trying to stick a chest out and say, I'm big, but looking at other people and thinking they've got great experience. How do we add to that pool that's already there? And I think it's brilliant, isn't it? We talked about Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Successful People. Is that right? Is that the title?
Highly effective.
Effective, yeah. Mm-hmm. Effective people. And what was the first one you pointed out? What's the first habit?
Yeah, the first habit is being proactive, right? So he kind of riffs off some work from Viktor Frankl, who puts forward this idea that one of the things that makes us so uniquely human is that when something happens to us, so let's bring up, the next stage of our relationship was about 3 years later, we got to have this lovely time where we're in each other's lives and out of each other's lives for about, what was it, 2 or 3 years that you were with us?
Something like that, yeah.
And then a crisis happened, right? There was a stimulus, something that happened. What makes us human is when we have a crisis or any kind of stimulus, there's a moment in between when something happens and we make our reaction, right? So our stimulus and our response, there's some finite number there. And sometimes it's really short and sometimes it's a little bit longer. But what we do in that space in between is really what characterizes us, right? It's how we are able to do something that nothing else in the natural world can do. We can choose, if we're mindful and hopefully successful, we can be proactive. Like, we have that ability to actually affect our outcome. We have that, I think it's called locus of control, right? Like, where you can actually affect what's going on. And that, from his book is the foundation of being effective, is accepting that. There's so many people, that go through life more just on autopilot, where you're a victim. Like, this thing happens to you and you just stuck, and that's really easy for someone of privilege to say and to point out. But crises happen, things negatively happen to us. We can talk about that experience and kind of the repercussions and what that looked like in our lives. But yeah, that's one of those foundational pieces that I think that I've been spending a lot of time thinking about since rereading the book recently.
Yeah, it's great, isn't it? Funny enough, I haven't read Stephen Covey's book, but I have read Frankel's book, Man's Search for Meaning, and I'm sure there's plenty of people listening to this have read and absolutely been in wonder about how he survived. But he was a concentration camp psychiatrist. I think he was a trained psychiatrist, and when he came out, they asked him to put a book together as to how he thought the successful ones, i.e. the survivors, managed to go through that. And he came out with some great quotes, wasn't it? And it was about that space in between stimulus and response. There's a space, and in that space lies our choice to choose our response, and in that response lies our power and our freedom. And that, for me, bringing in the understanding of the brain, is that we've got the limbic system. Well, we've got the prehistoric reptilian basic of function, walking hearts like reptiles do. Then we've got the next level, the limbic system, where the senses kick in to tell us there's a loud bang, there's a roar of a lion, and it gives us some sense of memory. Was that similar before? Was it just a nice deer running through the woods? And then we've got the executive brain at the front, the neocortex, which is, as you say, is the unique bit to us as human beings, which allows us to just put the nuance into life rather than just a basic structure. And it allows us to use our imagines, like Einstein said. Imagination is everything. It's the preview to life's coming attractions. Yet so many of us, going back to those limited beliefs, are stuck, I think, in the limbic system of fear, which grips us. Has to be the first point of awareness or realization is fear, because that's what kept us alive for all these years. We're in a very different situation now. We're not just having to survive, we are thriving. So I think once we recognize the brain structure and understand the importance of understanding about impulse control, not being hijacked by an emotional response to something, I'm not good enough, criticizing somebody else, we can actually start to open up the possibilities. And as you say, we can start to manifest, or locus of control or whatever, we can manifest so much more than we possibly ever considered. And again, I think that's using the imagination. Even the spiritualists talk about the fact that imagination is limited. And that's why getting to that complete stage of ripping away any identity and any fixed status with being a human being and just saying we are a spirit, borrowing the body from the ground, is the way to be, really. And then we just go into this incredible sense of bliss. So yeah, I think that, we have the privilege of flying at 45,000 feet, and I talk about this a lot. This is why Faraj and I are great friends, because of our spiritual understanding of similar things. So, and it doesn't matter how you get there, it's ripping away all those limitations in terms of our own mind. So that's part one of my conversation with David. We went over the mark, as I seem to be doing often at the moment. So I decided to split it into two. And we got into that wonderful conversation about emotional intelligence and asking for help and therapy, which I think is really important in my quest to support people to find the very best in themselves and overcome the obstacles that cause so much destruction upon ourselves and dishing it out to other people. So really hope you enjoyed that session, and David and I will return for part two next week.